Hello, and welcome to the 741 channel. Thank you for stopping by. The topic of today's video is the installation of the Pitman arm and center link on this 2004 Chevy Tahoe. This video is part of a series documenting removal and replacement of the Pitman arm, idler arm assembly, and inner and outer tie rods on this truck. If you'd like to see any of the other videos in this series, you'll find links to them in the description below and in thumbnail cards at the end screen of this video. So now here's a look at the Pitman arm. This is also from Moog. This is the K6536 HD. Again, for a 2004 Tahoe Z71. So here's the hardware bag. This time I'm going to remember to install the grease fitting before I put this on the truck. And before I do, you can see that the ball joint is packed full of grease. We don't really need to add any more. We just need to get this grease fitting on. I'm not sure why they don't add these at the factory, but yeah, it looks like these go on hard. I guess this hole here isn't tapped. So this is almost cutting its own threads, I guess. That's maybe why it's so hard to put on. So we'll crank this down and we should be good to go. We're under the truck now, taking a look at the Pitman arm shaft that extends from the bottom of the steering box. So this, of course, is where the splined end of the Pitman arm will mount back onto. I've gone over this with a wire brush and cleaned out the loose rust and dirt and that kind of a thing to just make it a little bit easier to slip that over. So what I'm going to have to do is pivot the steering box back up out of the way. It's still unbolted from the frame rail, of course, and movable here, as you can see. So I'll push that up out of the way of this stuff. I'll be able to slide the Pitman arm over the splines, and then I can kind of lower it back down sort of in this position and then put the nut back on. A couple of things to note here before I get going with installing the Pitman arm is that on the spline shaft, you can see there's some fatter splines. There's 4 of them, spaced 90 degrees apart, and those help orient or clock the Pitman arm so that it's in the right direction. Basically what we're going to want to do is make sure that it's pointing towards the back of the truck, just like the idler arm was over on the other side. We could theoretically put the Pitman arm on 90 degrees or 180 degrees out of kilter, but basically if it's pointing towards the back of the truck, that's the right way to do it, and the fatter splines will help align it the right way. So the Pitman arm is on the steering shaft. It's not on very far. It's on as far as it'll go, at least by hand. You can see that there is some of the shaft sticking out here, so I'll be able to thread the nut on. But you may be able to see here in the camera with the light, hopefully it's visible, all of the fat splines are lined up to the grooves in the spline shaft here. So I think we've got everything oriented right. It's now just a matter of getting that nut on and getting it tight enough without stripping it further. So I've got the nut and washer on the end here, and I've just got those snugged up. You can see that it's not tightened up onto the shaft yet. Now, in order to tighten it with the wrench, I'm going to have to get it back up and sort of in position here. So what I'm going to do is put the steering box back. You may be able to see here, I've got the steering box sort of roughly positioned where it needs to go. At least one of the bolts is, or one of the bolt holes rather. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this first bolt in to hold the weight of the steering box, and then I should be able to pivot it around and get the other 2 in. That wasn't as bad as I thought. I've got that first bolt in there, not really tight, just kind of loose in there still, but enough to hold everything. And you can see I can pivot the steering box now and just align the other 2, and I'll put those in and then tighten everything up. So I've got the steering box bolts snugged up, and now I'm going to torque them down. I couldn't find an exact torque spec on this, but I think it should be somewhere around 73 foot-pounds, similar to what was on the idler arm shaft. Ought to do just fine. So I've got my torque wrench. It's still set for 73, and I'll just tighten these up. So now that I've got the steering box all bolted up, everything is back into place. You can see that I've got enough room now to get my wrench on through here, through the front of the truck, and that's just the same way I took it off. Seemed to work okay. But the problem is, because I don't have the center link and tie rods hooked up, I really can't torque that down, because once I start turning this, it's going to move. What I need to do now is reconnect the center link and the old tie rod ends, and then I'll be able to turn the wheel one way or the other and lock, to the lock position, and then I should be able to torque that down. The next thing to do is to install the center link back onto the idler arm and pitman arms, and then once it's in place, put this foam washer, the castle nut, and then the cotter pin through. I'll be torquing the castle nut down to 50 foot-pounds. Before I get the center link put onto the pitman arm and idler arm, you can see that I've got the foam washer on the studs. This is the idler arm side, and I've got the washer in the same manner on the pitman arm side. So now what I'll do is swing the pitman arm, or the center link up, and I'm going to put it on the pitman arm first, because I got to clear the front differential there a little bit, and then I can slide it up onto the idler arm. Now I kind of already test fit these, and I had to move the idler arm around just to get the stud to line up to the hole. So now that I got that up there, I'm going to take the supplied castle nut, and I'm just going to crank that on a few turns by hand here, just enough to kind of hold it in place. And then I'm going to go to the other side, the pitman arm side, and I'll put that nut on just the same way. So next up, I'll just take my 21mm socket and a regular ratchet and just snug these up. So I'm going to work side to side. I got this one snugged a little bit. I'm going to try and get the other one sort of in an equal position, and then try to alternate between the two sides so that I don't, tip the center link out of kilter at all here. So now that I've got both of these nuts snugged up, I'm going to come over, and I'm now going to use my torque wrench and torque these down to 50 foot-pounds. I've got the nut torqued down to 50 foot-pounds. Actually, it's a little bit more. When I got to 50 foot-pounds, I took a look, and the opening in the castle nut was not lined up with the hole in the stud for the cotter pin, so I had to go a little bit more. If that happens to you, you want to make sure that you always tighten more. You don't want to back the nut off to line up to the hole. Always tighten it a little bit more. So I've got the cotter pin there. I'll get a pair of needle nose pliers and kind of bend that down so it locks in place. And now I'll just finish up the other side, and we should be good to go. Now that I've got these all torqued down and the cotter pins installed, it's time to get this guy torqued down to where he should be. So I'm getting ready to torque the nut down that holds the pitman arm to the steering box. And you may be able to see that I've removed it from the truck, even though I had it on there just snug before. And that was so I could put a little blue Loctite on the threads here. Everything that I've read online indicates that that would be a good idea to do, since it's probably going to be next to impossible to get this thing fully torqued down to the 185 foot-pounds that the factory is asking for. And since I'm using less than an ideal tool to do this, I thought it would be a good idea. So I've got a little bit of the blue Loctite on the threads of the stud, and I've added some to the inside threads of the nut as well. Now I'm going to use this adjustable wrench to tighten it up. This is the same tool that I used to take it off with, and it's the same tool that I ended up rounding over a couple of the points on that nut with. I don't recommend using this tool. If you can get your hands on the right size wrench, which is 1 5/16 inches, I highly recommend doing that. So I'm just going to make do with this wrench. I'm going to go slow, I'm going to pay attention and make sure that the jaws don't open up and round this nut over any further than I've already done. So having said all that, I'm going to start cranking this thing down. Well, that's about as far as I can go without using the pipe. Now I'm going to switch over to using the pipe. I'm going to go even slower than I was before and just make sure that this old adjustable wrench doesn't slip off that nut. So here's a look at the nut. This is about as tight as I'm going to be able to go with it. You may be able to see evidence right here that this point started to round over just a tiny bit. So that's where I'm going to stop. I'm not going to push my luck here any further than I have to. I think this is going to be okay. The bottom of the shaft is just about even with the bottom of the nut. In fact, it may even be protruding just a hair. I'm going to keep an eye on it over time and make sure. The other thing that I'll do here is in the next couple of weeks, I'll keep checking my local tool stores, and when the wrench that I need comes back in stock, I'll pick one up and put the right wrench on here and see if I can torque this down just a little bit more. What I'll do now is just try and pull this rubber boot back down over the splines. I pushed this up, I don't know, a couple of weeks before I even started this project, to just try and get a little bit of PB blaster shot in there. So like I said, now I'll just bring that down to kind of help protect those splines from any rust or dirt getting in there. So that's pretty much going to do it for installation of the Pitman arm on this 2004 Chevy Tahoe. The next video in this series is going to document the removal of the inner and outer tie rods on both sides of the truck. If you'd like to see that video, you'll find a link to it in the description below. There'll also be a clickable card on the end screen of this video. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to leave a comment or subscribe, feel free to do that as well. Thanks for watching.